All right, so Reverend Rick, so thank you for being here.
Oh gosh, it's always my pleasure. And I'm here in Salem. I'm usually with you all, and I'm just feeling a sense of yearning to be with people again. And I always enjoy so much coming to see everyone in McMinnville. So it's good to see you on Zoom screens. And I did get some questions emailed to me, and I think I'll just jump right into it and start answering as many as I can. I think I have 8 questions that I already have in advance, and so that'll give you time, if you haven't asked a question, to be thinking about a question you might like to ask a Unitarian Universalist minister about religion or ministry or Unitarian Universalism, world religion, society and politics. I'm pretty much willing to take on any question. Physics is probably not a good field for me, or chemistry, but I'll try to answer most of the questions that come my way. And the first one was, in this complicated and conflicted time, how can liberal religions serve us as individuals, as a species on Earth? I'm going to try to not spend too much time on each question, but one of the things that I've realized lately is that we're in the relationship construction business. And I think that that's incredibly important. There are so many people who don't feel as though they would fit into I guess I would call it a conventional religious community, where a certain system of belief is assumed that everybody shares. There's just a ton of people that need community and can't seem to find it easily. And so what we offer is an opportunity to find not just community, but community that's guided by values that are life affirming. And I think that when you talk to people at the end of their life and ask them what's the most important thing in their life, they'll say it's their relationships with other people. And so think of all the relationships that you've been able to form through your fellowship in McMinnville, and think of how poor your life would be without those relationships. And I think you get some value, some sense of the value of the religious community that you're building there. So you're in the relationship construction business, and it's something that's incredibly important in a time when there's so much isolation and loneliness in our world. The next question I have has to do with the covenant of Unitarian Universalist pagans and their relationship with the Unitarian Universalist Association. And there's another question that's related to that as well. The covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans is a chartered group from, it's under the auspices, I guess you would say, of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And yet it's also a nonprofit organization. We have a CUPS chapter in our congregation. It's kind of on a slow time right now. Everything is, but it's just one of many affiliate groups that people join when they have a particular theological interest, but they're also Unitarian Universalist. For a number of years, I served on the board of the Unitarian Universalist Buddhist Fellowship. I'm not on that board anymore, but that just gives you an example of the different groups that are connected to the Unitarian Universalist Association. So the covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans is for people, I think, who really feel a sense of connection to the earth, and that's really important in your spirituality. The subsidiary question that also came along with that is, what are Unitarian Universalist attitudes towards polytheistic neo-pagans? I'm not sure that pagans are polytheistic. I think that maybe they see the sacred coming in many different places, but maybe that's one source. So I've never talked to a pagan and confronted them on their polytheism. I'm not sure that would be something I would do anyway, but I think that the pagans are, it's a powerful presence in our movement, because there's so many people who are, their spirituality is so connected to their their sense of spirituality. And I would, I think that whatever your belief system is, if it's life affirming and it doesn't harm other people, you're most welcome in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. And there's always the understanding that you're not speaking for everyone when you do have a particular orientation. I got a question here. What's the difference between Unitarian Universalists and Quakers? When we first moved to our building where we are now, we built a building, and we left an old building that we used to own, and we sold it to the Quakers. And so I was able to say on our last Sunday, this is a society of friends, I was able to say, we have not left this place friendless, because the Society of Friends had taken over it. And I often tell the story of how we sold the building to them, and we told them how much we were charging, and we were waiting for the counter offer, and all we got was the answer from the Quakers that said that what we had were willing to sell the building to them for was an acceptable price for them, and we were a little bit taken aback. We were expecting a lower counter offer, and then we were supposed to kind of meet them in the middle, but then the Quakers said, well, that would show that we didn't have a trusting attitude towards one another, and we assumed that you gave us a good price, and it would be a sign of disrespect. And so afterwards, I noted that it's too bad we didn't realize the Quakers were such soft touches. We could have gotten more money for our building, but that's not true. I was heartened to learn this lesson from the Quakers, to be aware that one of my dear friends in the community, Rose Lewis, she just died recently. She was an activist. She was a Quaker, and we had really deep and rich discussions, and I admired her tremendously. The Quakers have a specific theological orientation that really is different than Unitarian. It's not different than Unitarian Universalists. It's just that Unitarian Universalism, I think, encompasses more perspectives and acknowledges more perspectives. And I think when you join the Quakers, or this is the type of Quakers known as the Society of Friends, where they're the silent Quakers, that they're more grounded in a specific religious narrative and a religious tradition, which I actually admire quite a bit. And I don't see any incompatibility between the two traditions. There's just some overlap, and they're different. But I greatly admire the Quaker tradition. Particularly, the early Quakers were actually troublemakers. We always think of the Quakers as kind of passive people, but if you ever read, there was a biography recently that came out a couple of years ago about Benjamin Lay, who was an abolitionist dwarf Quaker. And this guy was a big troublemaker. You should read about him to get some sense of the fullness of the Quaker tradition. I have another question here about I assume you have a new ministerial candidate. Is that true? Sounds like it. Somebody who's going to come. And so I got a question is, what should we look for in a new candidate? And I thought about that because I had a couple of minutes to think about it. I think that obviously it's going to be kind of beyond words. There's going to be a sense of, yeah, this relationship is going to work. But I remember reading about a search committee in another church, and even in another tradition, and they were describing, the search committee was describing the minister who came in and had all these great plans and all this stuff, and then was just going to turn the church into a mega church, and it was just an amazing, he had just all these blueprints for great success. And then another minister who came in as a candidate and was just really more interested in learning about the congregation and finding out who they were and where they were and what they were up to, so that their ministry could pair up with who. So I think it's really important to find somebody who's willing to observe and serve rather than come in and impose. Somebody who has a sense of, gets a sense of who you are and builds on your strengths and doesn't builds on your strengths and complements your strengths. it might be good to have a sense of what are you good at? What are you really think you are good at? And then maybe look for your minister to expand upon those strengths, but not to impose upon you. I want to emphasize that point, actually. I think there's a danger of clergy coming in and imposing a particular perspective or opinion upon you. And that's not our role. I don't think that's our role at all. I think our role is to respect your freedom of conscience, to honor that, and to enter into kind of relationship where you can help people learn to trust in themselves. I'll end up this question. You want somebody who feels trustworthy. You just have that sense that, hey, if we have some hard times, we'll get through it because we're fair to each other. We can trust one another. Somebody who's got a sense of flexibility. I can't tell you how often I've come in with great plans and I realized after some discussion that it wasn't such a great plan. I needed to be flexible. I needed to listen to other people's opinions. And finally, I guess I would say sense of humor. Look for somebody with a sense of humor. If you don't have a sense of humor, that's not going to go well. So that's important. I'm up there. Question number 6 is, what opportunities or blessings, I think, does the COVID-19 bring? Well, obviously it brings a lot of pain and dislocation for lots of people. And we never want to overlook that fact. However, I think that as you mentioned, Ken, in your opening, there are opportunities for some people who are not struggling to pay the bills. And if you are, my heart goes out to you. I just know it's a really incredible, stressful time. But I'm finding it's a real good time to kind of settle into where you are. In the Buddhist tradition, Jack Kornfield, he in his book, A Path with a Heart, he talks about taking the one seat. And when you're in a meditation retreat, you're sitting on your cushion, and about 90% of the time, you really don't want to be there because your legs are hurting or you're distracted, but you just take the one seat and you sit there and you deal with it. And a lot of stuff comes up, but you don't run away, you deal with it. And so I think that this maybe is giving some of us an opportunity to be where we are in our homes and just sort of connect in new ways. Connect to the people around you, connect to your house, your environment, maybe connect to your neighbors, social distancing. I'm taking social distancing walks with my neighbors, including people I've never done it with, like my neighbor, John Moody. He was a retired Presbyterian minister down the street, and I'm enjoying my walks with him. So having my son at home during this time has been great. He doesn't necessarily think it's great. He wants to be back in New York City where he has got a thriving career starting off, but we're okay that he's stuck here and hope he'll stay around for a little bit longer. So I think another blessing of the COVID-19, not blessing, but a consequential blessing is that I'm so grateful for things in my life that I took for granted. And it's made me more aware of the fragility of life and how to be aware of what I've really got and not take it for granted. So I'm really sold on the practice of gratitude. I think gratitude is a path to happiness. So COVID is, I think, helping us some in that regard as well, learning how to feel grateful for what we have. And you know, when I was buying groceries yesterday, I felt incredibly grateful for the checkout person, somebody I perhaps often didn't pay enough attention to. So maybe I'm paying attention in some new ways to things that I haven't paid before. Here's a question that has been in my mind in a way before the question was asked. You know, in our Unitarian Universalists, the ministers, we have a code of professional ethics, some guidelines, and one of the things that we're advised, counseled, admonished not to do is to say something bad about another Unitarian Universalist minister. So that's a good thing. But what if you knew that a minister was doing something unethical or wasn't, you didn't think was being a good minister for whatever reason, a serious reason? Would you simply be compelled to keep your mouth shut and not say anything because you're not supposed to say anything bad about another minister? Well, no. You should. There are processes for, oh, I think you have about 5 or 6 minutes. Oh my God. There are processes for going to an ethics committee. If I ever sensed that a minister was doing something wrong, then I would do it. And in fact, I'm actually in the middle of a huge conflict right now with quite a number of my colleagues who I think have done something wrong, and I'm calling them on it. And it's not making me popular, but we don't have time for that. Maybe I'll describe that to you at some other point. Let's see. Question number 8 is, why is it so difficult to achieve social justice in this country? Well, first of all, let's at least acknowledge that if you compare my life, my early days when I lived in a segregated South to now, I think that I could say we have made some progress. On the other hand, I look at the economic situation and it seems like we maybe have slid backwards. And so social justice is, society is incredibly complicated, and it's hard to know which levers to pull to make changes happen. I honestly do think we're becoming a more just and compassionate global society over the long haul. It's a long and painful haul, but one of the reasons I think that we have so much trouble with social justice in our country is that the legacy of slavery has really, really damaged us in many ways, more than we actually realize. A number of economists have called what our system is low road capitalism. Low road capitalism has been shaped by slavery. The practices of slavery have impacted our whole system in ways you wouldn't even begin to understand unless you read about it a little bit. And I think that the type of system that creates a lot of holes in the safety net originally because they didn't want to offer aid to Black people. And so we have a really, really broken economic system, as we're seeing with the pandemic, that makes it really hard for us to care for everyone. And I'm hoping that through this pandemic and afterwards, we're going to have an honest chance to look at a society that is more just and inclusive. I should try to, I've been waiting for this question. My favorite historical UU figure is, there's a 19th century abolitionist minister named Samuel Joseph May. Write that down, Samuel Joseph May. He was a minister in Syracuse, New York. He is, I think, the most overlooked figure in our movement's history. He is my model for being a minister. He had such courage. He was very, worked very closely with William Lloyd Garrison, the famous abolitionist. He really put himself on the line. He was so far ahead of the curve in terms of working against racism and women's rights. But he was a kind and gentle soul. If you go online, you can actually download a free book on his life. It's pre-copyright. It's from the 19th century, but he's a fascinating character. And I think it's important for us to have heroes, because we need to have real life embodiments of what we think our values are. And if we don't have real life embodiments of our values to look at, to emulate, it's harder to live into them. I'm a real believer in what I call embodied theology, which means I look to people. I read a lot of biographies because I think that studying the lives of other people is really important. The lives that I study the most, of course, are the lives of the members of my congregation. I learned so much from the members of the congregation. And really, when you get right down to it, it's the members of the congregations who are my spiritual heroes. You folks rock. You make the movement exist. And I'm just so, in these latter sunset years of my ministry, I'm just so profoundly aware of what a great gift a congregation is. And you're the overlooked, unsung heroes, in my opinion. I've answered all your questions. I mean, what a miraculous power I have. I'm glad that you're fully informed now and can go forth.